Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 318. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whelan, Dr. Norge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, and the Duke of You-Know. On this episode, we're joined by longtime friend of the show, Jamal Igle. We're going to be talking about his upcoming Kickstarter called Molly Danger. And we haven't had an opportunity to have a creator on to talk about Kickstarter. I thought it was a good chance. We've mentioned some Kickstarter campaigns on the show, but haven't really gone in depth with what Kickstarter is, how creators get involved in Kickstarter projects. So Jamal was kind enough to join us to talk about his current work on Molly Danger and what that whole Kickstarter genesis was like, which I figure a lot of our listeners, after hearing us do some promos about things like Molly Danger and leaving Megalopolis, this would be a great opportunity for you to learn what Kickstarter is, how you can support it, and how to find projects such as Molly Danger that you're going to be interested in. So I want to thank Jamal for joining us on this episode. We also talked casually about his comic book work for DC, such as The Ray. He is going to be the artist upcoming on Smallville Season 11. We didn't get a chance to talk about that because those issues haven't been released yet, but that is something that's coming up. And also his work on Kiss. He just did 2 issues for Kiss from IDW. And for anybody that's a fan of the band or not, there's a really cool story there that we end up talking about on this episode as well. So it's cool to kind of talk about Jamal's work in and out of DC and with his upcoming creator-owned project. So I want to thank once again Jamal Igle for joining us. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is once again DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, they're offering that 50% off deal again, and I love how they're doing this. Anytime new books are being released from the big publishers, they seem to be doing these 50% off deals to let people have a chance to try the books out. They're doing it with DC's Wave 3, Talon #1, Phantom Stranger #1, Sword and Sorcery #1, and Team 7 #1 are all 50% off this month. So if you're thinking of trying out those books, it's a great opportunity to try them out at an extra discount from DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, they have a crazy sale going on right now. They have a bunch of select DC titles, these would be trade paperbacks, hardcovers, and such, at 65% off. So this is a great opportunity to get some of these books at 65% off from InStockTrades.com. Remember, orders of $50 or more for them give you free shipping, so that's InStockTrades.com. I want to share some sad news, which I'm sure almost everybody listening has heard this week. Joe Kubert passed away. And since our last episode, he passed away, and I wanted to say something about it. And we actually had a couple of emails asking if we were going to do an episode relating to Joe Kubert. And we are going to do something. It's not something I want to rush to do. I want, like any episode that we put together here, we plan it out, we reread the material and things like that. I'm thinking right now what we're going to do is save this. We've got coming up his miniseries that's going to be released from DC. So I'm waiting to see what the status is of that, just because it was his last work. I think it'd be kind of cool to really talk about that and then reminisce about our own experiences with Joe Kubert's work, because Jim and I are in very different places. Jim read a lot of his stuff more recently. So I don't know quite yet what Jim and I are going to do. We're kind of playing a wait and see on what DC's doing with his final project. We are going to do something on the podcast relating to Joe Kubert down the road. So that is coming up. We just haven't really had an opportunity to really decide on that. But it's very sad news. He's a creator that, if you've never read any of Joe Kubert's work or seen his artwork before, I guarantee you that he has touched somebody that you are currently enjoying. He's one of those creators that has influenced so many with the Kubert School, his own artwork. So if you haven't had a chance to check out some of his material, I can't recommend it highly enough. His artwork has been second to none, and it's a major loss to the comic industry, because I guarantee you either you've read and enjoyed his material before, or you have definitely enjoyed somebody who's been influenced by him. And, I'm not, any of these words that I'm doing here aren't going to do him justice right now. We're definitely going to do something, a cool segment revolving around him down the road. We just want to put that together carefully like we do any other segment that we've done on the show, so we really do him justice. So that will be down the road from Raging Bullets. But it's a sad week. Anytime we lose somebody that has touched the comic book industry, it's sad, because I think artists over time only get better. They just improve. They it's musicians are the same way. I think people hone their craft and they just deliver. They continue to deliver amazing things, and that's a big loss for the comic industry. Oh, Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on the show. So, if you haven't read the book, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk with Jamal Igle.
A scarlet costume ejects from his ring, and in a blur of motion, police scientist Barry Allen becomes the Flash.
Joining us is longtime friend of the show, artist extraordinaire Jamal Igle. And Jamal, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Jamal, I've been a big fan of yours. I actually still have framed on my wall. It's one of my favorite sketches because it was the first one I ever got. It was your Firestorm sketch that I got from you at Pittsburgh Comic-Con in 2006.
Yeah.
I absolutely fell in love with your work. It was my first exposure to your work was on that book. I remember when you did the costume redesign on it, I was completely blown away. And that's been, for me, a real consistency with you whenever you've popped on a new project. From things like Supergirl, even to one-shots. Like, I remember that Countdown one-shot that you did with the Jokester. I thought that one, Crime Society one. I adored that one. There was so much emotion. It was a very contained piece. And straight through to the Zatanna, now the Ray, and this Kiss was one that, like, it took me back to when I was a kid with the bubblegum cards.
Right.
You're one of those guys whose artwork, everything that you do, every project's unique. There's a different emotional experience, and it's really a pleasure for me to have you back on the show to talk to you. And I really want to focus the beginning of our discussion on Molly Danger. For fans out there listening to this who maybe haven't heard what Molly Danger is yet, can you give us just a little quick, what is Molly Danger? Give us a little tease to this.
Sure. Molly Danger is the adventures of the world's most powerful 10-year-old girl who has been 10 years old for the last 20 years. Molly protects a city in upstate New York called Coopersville. She lives and works out of the Molly Danger Museum and Gift Shop. She's got a Molly Mobile. She's got a support team known as Danger's Action Response Team, or DART. There's merchandising. There's promo material. There's posters. She's plastered all over this town. She is the number one tourist industry in the Northeast at the moment. But Molly is also an incredibly lonely little girl. She's almost like a princess in an ivory tower. She doesn't have a secret identity. She doesn't have any friends. DART's operating procedure basically is to keep her at arm's length and not have any personal contact with her. She longs for a real life. She doesn't know what it's like to be normal. She's always been Molly Danger. When we meet her in the story, she loves being Molly, but at the same time, she really wants to know what it's like to be a normal person. And what happens is a new member joins the DART team, a former police helicopter pilot named Austin Briggs. And if I were casting Austin in a movie, he'd probably be played by Owen Wilson. He's just he's a dude, bro. You know what I'm saying? He's very laid back and very like, hey, everything's okay. Everything's going to be good. He's kind of a hot dog, but he's also a new father. Or a new stepfather, rather. And his stepson, Brian, hates him with a passion. But Brian's also a Molly Danger fan. So the entire reason why Austin has been trying to join DART is so that he can get closer to Molly Danger and use that relationship to try and form a relationship with Brian. What happens next is Austin breaks the rules and brings Molly home to meet the family. And that's the basics. I mean, there's a lot going on in this story, but this is something that I've been sort of caressing and nursing in various forms for about a decade now, actually.
Yeah, it was like 2001 on a car ride, right? Wasn't that what I was reading on the site for Kickstarter?
Yeah, my buddy Rich Marizio and I were it was coming back from Pittsburgh, from the Pittsburgh Comic-Con in 2001. Originally envisioning Molly as an animated series, and we were going to try and pitch it to Cartoon Network. The both of us being comic book guys, we just figured, well, let's try to do this as a comic book. So we had every intention of doing it. And I wrote a standard 22-page script originally. I started doing artwork on it, and then I started getting busy with paying work. and busier and busier and busier. And eventually I couldn't draw it myself. So we hired another artist named Jamal Peppers. He started doing work on it based on my layouts. He did about 5 or 6 pages, and then he couldn't work on it anymore. And we kept putting it aside and kept saying, we're going to come back, we're going to do this, we're going to get it done. It just sort of snowballed. Eventually I ended up working at DC on Firestorm, and then the 1 year that I was on Firestorm turned into 6 years as an exclusive. So you turn around and 7 years have gone by. And you're wondering, where did the time go?
One of the cool things about that is, though, you've had a chance to really establish yourself as a name in the industry, and now you're coming back and doing this through Kickstarter. I've been a big fan of Kickstarter. I love these projects that are coming up from Kickstarter. I've supported a number of them. I'm looking at some books on my shelf right now that have come from Kickstarter. Womanthology, Athena Voltaire.
Right.
I've got one coming from Tom Zoller. I'm loving Kickstarter because they're these projects that I think are offering us as fans an opportunity to connect with people such as yourself who we're huge fans of, who we love your work, and we get a chance to connect with something that's been passionate to you and to help be a part of this whole process. What led you to Kickstarter for this?
Well, what had happened was when my contract was winding up earlier this year, I had been approached by a couple of different writers about possibly doing a project and raising the funding through Kickstarter. And at that point, I'd never even heard of Kickstarter. So I did some investigation of the site and the idea behind crowdfunding, and probably around the time that the Order of the Stick was blowing up on the site, and they had the Pebble Watch and other things that were getting like $1 million, $1.5 million, $1.25 million, that sort of thing, $3 million. I looked at the site and I basically said, you know what, this is a really good idea. If I'm going to do something, it should be for something of mine that I'm passionate about, that I care about. I had already, at that point, had retooled the entire Molly concept from what we were originally planning on doing with it, and I had pitched it to a couple of mainstream publishers, and it hadn't gone anywhere. I guess serendipity, combined with just some of the things that I was feeling about the state of the industry and the state of comics for younger readers and all ages comics. And it was just taking all of that, everything that I was feeling at the time, and still do, just saying to myself, you know what, this is the project. This is the one, out of all the ideas that I probably have rolling around in my head, this is the one that's already the most fully formed in terms of concept. This is the one that I feel the strongest about. And even I had talked to some friends of mine and told them what I was planning, and they were all like, well, you should do this project because I think this one's a little bit more gritty, I guess. But Molly just kept coming back to me as the project to pursue. So, that was the reason why I went to Kickstarter with it. I knew I didn't want to try and do it as a monthly comic book series because the format that I've picked and just the scope of the story just required it to be bigger.
I like that because I think comics are a medium, and it's one of the things that I really enjoy about it. It's a very flexible medium to the type of storytelling you want to do. You can do these short, little weekly digital things that are coming up, and I'm a big fan of those. I'm really enjoying that kind of delivery method. You can do web comics. You can do monthly books. You can do original graphic novels. I know you're doing this, and it's going to be a twice-a-year hardcover format is the plan for this?
Right, that's the plan. It's twice a year. The entire story is 4 books. Each book will be 48 pages, full color, hardcover, 9x12, European-sized editions.
That's going to be awesome for me. I love the fact that it's an all-ages material because for me as a school teacher, I love, and I'm not saying picking it up for my students, I'm going to pick it up for me first. I always do. But for myself on a personal level, I really enjoy, I have lunch with my students 3 to 4 times a week, and I really enjoy seeing them pulling out comic book material that I'm currently reading, I'm currently enjoying, that's appropriate for them, and being able to have great discussions with them about that. The great thing about Molly, when you were telling the story with her, the first thing that came to my mind is fun. And I'm always leery to use that word now because at some point in time, fun became this word that was diminished. And to me, it's the most important reason to, not just for comics, I think for any entertainment medium, if you're not having fun with that medium, what are you bothering with it for? As a fan.
And I would agree with that, actually.
That was the first thing, especially when I saw that first promo art that you had put out on Facebook from it. That was my first connection with Molly Danger. I remember you putting that out there. And it was a nice anticipatory build with this being able to use social media for your fans and to connect that way. So when Kickstarter hit, I was really jonesing for this. As you started fleshing out the story and telling us some little teasers about it, I love that it's this girl who wants to feel like she belongs, feels alone, wants to feel normal. I think all of us in our life, whether it's young or old, at some point in time in your life, everybody goes through that experience where you feel alone. You feel isolated. You feel like you don't belong to something. It could be a transition period. It could have been something, your memory from your childhood. I actually will argue that we probably go through multiple stages of that in life in various circumstances, whether it's in family, friends, work, wherever. I think we've all gone through that. So I think there's something in this story that can connect with everybody, whatever age level. That's when you throw out all ages, I think it's really important to remind people that all ages does not mean for kids. It means it can be read by kids, but it's also something that's uniquely appropriate for everybody, and you can all get things on a different level. It's very Pixar. I love Pixar. And one of the things I love about their movies is that it works on different levels.
It's very true. It's funny that you mentioned Pixar because that's really sort of been the focus of how I'm shaping the story behind Molly. When I think of all ages material, I think Pixar comes to mind, but I also think of old Warner Brothers cartoons and the way that they were written, where there was something for everybody on multiple levels. So basically what I want to do with Molly Danger as a story is that I want it to be something that adults will enjoy, that they will be able to give to their children and not feel uncomfortable with the visual material, because that's how the kids are going to absorb it first. They're not going to get every little nuance or story element. But if you present the material in a visually appealing way that isn't gory or overt, or you can have a serious story, but it's the way that you handle it. And that's really been sort of my complaint with a lot of the mainstream comic books right now.
And I think that's something I think there's a lot of room for this type of material. It's something that I've always enjoyed. I honestly think one of the big problems when you hit all ages material, and I think one of the areas where it gets lost, is there's always a label on it that denotes that it's for kids. Right. And I understand why they're doing that, because they want to be able to point families to kid-appropriate material. So I get that. I'm not, naive to that. But I think sometimes what ends up happening is you get an older reader who will immediately think that material's dumbed down just because it's got that label on it, and they don't give it a chance. I think that's where the Pixar example, I think, is absolutely brilliant, because I think the stuff that Pixar's been doing for modern day is cutting edge with its storytelling, cutting edge with its approach to being, the Warner Brothers cartoons example are great. I watch Warner Brothers cartoons now. I love that I get the literature references that are in there. That as a kid, I had no clue, of mice and men's all over the place in Warner Brothers cartoons. As a kid, did I have any clue who George and Lenny were? Well, no. I kind of knew them in a Mice and Men because of Warner Brothers cartoons. I'm like, that's where they were.
It's exactly that. It's like I had no idea when I was 6 years old watching Bugs Bunny cartoons. I didn't know who Wendell Willkie was.
Right.
But it just sounded like a fun when the gremlin yells, "Well, it ain't Wendell Willkie." You're just like, who's Wendell Willkie? And but these are the things that you figure out as you mature and as you age, and that's why we're still able to appreciate those cartoons to this day. And it's the same way. There used to be a time when you could do serious stories. Like, I'll give you a perfect example: Bambi. Walt Disney's Bambi.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very serious story. There's some dark stuff in Bambi. But it's done in such a way that the entire family is able to enjoy it on multiple levels. We don't have enough of that. We don't have enough gateway comics anymore, like the ones that we had when we were kids. One of the examples that I love to use is Claremont and Burns' X-Men.
Oh, yeah.
There was fetish and sadomasochism and murder and all those soap opera elements thrown into it, but I still would not be uncomfortable giving Katie, when she's 6 or 7, letting her read the Dark Phoenix saga. It was the way that it was presented.
That I grew up reading that. That's right. I want to go back to Bambi in 1 second, but when you were talking about the Claremont and Byrne X-Men, that was one of my, aside from Spider-Man, that was one of my first Marvel teams. And I remember being at French's Pharmacy, picking up an issue of the Claremont and Byrne X-Men, and just being drawn into these characters. And everything that you mentioned was stuff at that age I didn't get out of the book. Reading it now as an adult, and I've recently been going back and rereading, a lot of the comics that I grew up with, as a child, to see what stuff holds up and what stuff reads differently now. And when I was rereading a lot of that, I was like, wow, there's a lot of things in this that I did not catch. And I love, that's great. It's great to revisit that material. And I actually encourage anybody listening to do that. Go back to a lot of that stuff, a lot of the comics that drew you in as a child, and go back and reread them and see what you missed, because I think that they worked on a lot of layers, and that's something that I really enjoy. Bambi was another great example. I'm a big Disney fan in general. Anyway, I love Disney films. I love animation, and I saw Bambi recently. And it shocked me, actually, how dark it really gets. Because as a kid, I remember Thumper and Flower and Bambi and like the kind of the fun friendship that was in the film. I didn't remember it getting so dark. I don't know if it was just maybe the kid in me tuned that part out because I was just so focused on the fun friendship group that they had. But I didn't remember that. And I remember watching it and going, wow, this was really a very deep movie where it goes.
I still get a little choked up when I watch Bambi. The dad, 10-point buck, he gets away clean. And the hunter takes down the mom, which is a doe. What was the guy thinking?
Oh, jeez.
It's good to see your priorities are still in place, Jim.
Yeah, I'm going to get hate mail on that one.
I'm going to be the first one to write it. One thing I want to mention, this is being done through Action Labs. Can you tell us a little bit about Action Labs and your relationship there?
Action Lab Entertainment, which is it's a small company. They're an up-and-coming company. They are the publishers of Fracture, which is a superhero comedy series about a guy with multiple personalities. He's a normal guy, but he's also the city's greatest superhero and the city's greatest supervillain all at the same time.
That's awesome.
Their big hit right now is a book called Princeless, which was nominated for 2 Eisner Awards this year as well, and they also won a multitude of Glyph Awards from the Black Age of Comics conference. Princeless is about sort of a fairy tale princess whose father decides that he's going to lock her up in a tower so that she can be rescued by a prince. But she decides that she's going to free herself from the tower with the help of the dragon that's been guarding her tower and go and rescue her sisters from other towers that their father has locked them up in.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
It is. They've got another series called Double Jumpers, which is also very good. It's about a group of professional game designers who accidentally switch places with their avatar characters from the game. And the avatar characters are running around at a game convention while the game designers are trapped in the game world. So
that's cool.
So they are excellent. I mean, as far as like the content and the professionalism of the packages and everything, they're excellent. And I don't just say this because they're they're going to be my publishers, but they're also very good friends of mine. I knew that I wasn't going to take Molly to IDW or Image or a larger publisher. And I had originally intended on self-publishing the 2,000 copy print run for Kickstarter myself. But I started thinking about taking the book to Action Lab. And at the very same time, Action Lab was thinking about approaching me about publishing Molly. So it just worked out. And
their projects, when you were describing their projects, it sounds like a good fit for Molly. I mean, it sounds like Molly belongs there because you hear the unique projects that are being done there. It almost sounds like Molly's rounding a lot of that off. You know what I mean? It sounds like they've got a nice circle of projects going on that are unique and different and touching on different avenues. And like you put Molly in there, it feels like home. It feels like it fits.
Absolutely. And these again, one of the reasons why I went with Action Lab is because they're people that I know, they're people that I trust. They're talented. They've got good sense of what works and what doesn't work, and because part of my reasoning for going to them also was because they're my friends. I'm hoping that my presence there can help elevate the company as well.
And there'll be links in our show notes to Action Lab Entertainment. So for anybody listening, we already put on a couple episodes ago. I did a promo for your Kickstarter, so that will obviously be on this episode as well, but I'll also put a link directly to their site, so that way anybody listening to this and wants to check out some of their books. I know I'm going. The ones you're rattling off there, all three of them. I'm like, okay, fractured.
And there's more. There's more stuff, and they're growing. They're growing. They've got some exciting stuff coming up.
I'm a big believer, and it's one of the reasons why. The whole purpose of this podcast is really about. You look at that previews catalog every month. It's like a phone book.
Right.
And I think nowadays, even more beyond the previews catalog, there is so much creativity out there now in the comic book medium of people trying new things, telling new kinds of stories. I hear a lot of the negativity from people about, I don't like this, I don't like that, and I want to see more of this type of thing, where you were just in this rant right now, you just rattled off 3 series that sound really incredibly interesting that really I'd love to see more people jump on those.
Right.
And, promote the heck out of like what they're loving in comics. I think there's a lot of great comics that are falling under the radar, whether from big publishers straight on through to small publishers to independently published books that really need notice and attention that people are enjoying that they're not ranting enough about. And that's really the main purpose of this show has always been that. I'm a fanboy. I've been my whole life. I'm not just a DC fanboy. I'm a comic fanboy. I've read, from probably every publisher out there at some point because I love the medium. I'm like a sponge for this stuff. And I think, projects like Molly Danger is a great example of what I love about this medium. I remember when, like, comic book magazines like Hero Illustrated came out. And that was, for me, a lot of times my gateway into some underground independent comics that I didn't know about. They were doing great articles about these great creators. That's where, like, people like your Jeff Smiths, I first got exposed to him, James Owen from Star Child. And it's great to see that energy continuing today. And Molly Danger is one of those projects that, like, the second you started throwing a preview art of it, I'm like, oh, this is like, I'm not reading anything like this. This looks super cool.
I was going to say, one of the things for me is because, one, I'm not a big fan of little children. Some people like kids, some don't. I'm in that group. I'd rather have a dog. But I honestly, it's one of the things I've started doing the show and just my appreciation of other types of comics and other ideas and concepts out there has really grown. And this, when I first started hearing about this, I'm like, oh, okay, that should be pretty cool because it's Jamal. And then you started hearing just, what it's about and saw the video clip and just you start seeing the passion, you start seeing the fire. And I'm like, I'm just equally as excited. And for me, it's got nothing to do with kids or any. It's just, this sounds like a really cool project, and it sounds like a very passionate project for you. So Thanks. I'm really looking forward to this one, man.
Thank you so much. It's hard for me to really express sometimes like how important it is to me. I don't even think, honestly, like the video really comes across as well as I would like. With the video that I did for a Kickstarter, folks could check it out at kickstarter.com/Molly Danger, or use the search function or go to mollydanger.com. Plug. That was actually the second version of the video that I did. The first version was me reading off of cue cards, and it didn't sound sincere enough. I really wanted to, I started talking about, we've got all these great incentives, this is the publishing plan, this is what we want to do. After a while, I was watching a video and I was just like, you know what, this is, it sounds too mechanical. It sounds too rehearsed. It's just, you just need to sit down and speak from your heart. And that's exactly what I did. I just sat down in front of my iPhone. I filmed the whole thing on an iPhone, and I just talked for probably 3 hours and got it down to 4 minutes.
That's impressive editing.
You got to tell us your secret, because for 300 and something episodes, we haven't been able to do that. He did it in one.
One of the things I always like whenever get to see at the cons and get to hang out and talk to you, it's always when ask you about your daughter. You can always see that that proud papa comes out, and with Molly Danger, I can see kind of that proud papa coming out. You can see that nurturing, that father. You're protecting. This is your baby. This is your project. This is that thing that's special to you. And I was kind of wondering if the little one actually did kind of help change what Molly Danger ended up being. Was there some tweaks and some influences because of that?
Ooh. Definitely. I have to backtrack a little bit and just sort of explain how different the project is now from when we originally conceived it. When we originally started talking about the idea, she started out very much in more of like a through the looking glass kind of concept, with a little like Amethyst Princess of Gem World thrown in. Yeah. The idea being that the reader wouldn't know whether Molly's life were real or the normal life that she was living in this other reality was the real existence, because it was going to jump back and forth between realities. And I think there was probably a little bit of a little Calvin and Hobbes kind of influence thrown in there as well. Whenever it does he ever did the spaceman spiff thing, and where you weren't sure what was real. And when I started retooling the concept a couple of years ago, I definitely wanted to streamline it. I wanted to simplify it, and I wanted it to be a much more straightforward telling. And yeah, Katie really has had a lot of influence on where the story went. Once I started reworking the entire concept, it's not just Katie, but looking at my nieces and thinking about my life and thinking about how I grew up. For me, I had a very complicated childhood. On the one hand, I was this very shy, very not introverted, because I was shy on one hand, but on the other hand, I was also a performer. I was also an actor. So whenever I got on stage, I opened up completely. But in my normal life, I was being picked on, I was being abused. It was a very complicated experience for me. So when I started thinking about what direction I wanted to take the story, I basically said to myself, there's certain things that I want to explore. What does it feel like to be so loved on one hand, but completely ignored on the other, or feel like you're completely ignored on the other hand? What does it feel like to look out at the world from this imaginary glass prison that you end up being trapped in, not just emotionally, but in her case, physically also. She is 10 years old, and as far as anybody, she still thinks like a 10-year-old. She's still emotionally 10. But she's watched the people around her grow old and die for 20 years. But in spite of everything else, she is still the same upbeat kid that she always was. And it's very hard for her. There's a lot of things that I really wanted to explore. What is it like as a kid to literally have the weight of the world on your shoulders? You are this city's protector. You are their greatest hero. But what happens when everything that you believe gets turned on its ear? What happens when everything that you think you know about yourself, as far as she knows, as far as anybody knows, she is this immortal alien that crash landed on Earth. Her parents died. She has all these memories of this life that she had before she crash landed on Earth. But everything that she knows from that point on is being Molly Danger. So what happens when all of that is taken away from her?
That's neat. When you were sharing your own personal story and when you were talking about Molly and her own struggles that she was going through, I connected with that. And I think a lot of people listening to this, any of us that are in this geek culture, I didn't have a lot of friends in elementary school. A lot of my friends, actually my strongest friendship group really comes from people that I made friends with in high school. Even kids that I went to elementary school, I wasn't really close with until high school. Kind of the geeky kid who, I liked comics. I didn't play sports. I was the shy, quiet kid, the same thing like that. But I think we've all, as I mentioned earlier, gone through moments like that. Right. And to have Molly, she bases her life and her motivation on believing one thing. And to have that taken away from her, I'm curious to see where she will go from there, what will motivate her from there. It's a character who feels very real and very natural. And that's something that I really enjoy when you have this accessible character who you can relate to on a personal level. And that's just how I'm relating to her, just from what you're saying. Somebody else listening to this, I guarantee you, is relating to her in a completely different way than I am. But they're taking some moment from their life and saying, you know what? This hits me right here. And I love the emotion in the story. This is a book that isn't even out yet, and I've already got an emotional connection with it. And I love that. These are projects that I get excited about when, there's a teaser for it and there's a hook that hits me personally. And I do think this is something that there's very few other mediums that are capable of doing stuff like this the way that comics are, because I think you're able to do a lot in 48 pages of a comic book and deliver a lot of story in a way that you can't produce on television. You don't have the time and you don't have the budget usually to be able to tell stories this deep and this rich in that kind as you can in this kind of format, because you've got a lot of freedom in comics that you just don't have elsewhere. And this is a project that I'm really excited about because of that. I'm like getting emotional listening to the story. I'm like, wow, this connected me with my childhood. I'm like, and I like that. I do think that that's something. It's proof that it can be a fun story, but then, look at this deep emotional connection we're getting just talking about this story. So, it just shows the deepness and the richness of the story universe that you're crafting there, and I'm really excited for it.
Thanks, man. I mean, my entire goal, honest to God, is to make people cry at this, but it'll be a good cry. By the end of the story, it will. By the end of book 4, it will be a good deep cry, and you will hopefully thank me for it.
One thing I am
going to take you through the emotional rigor. I really am.
I'll tell you, I've only had so far two books that actually pulled a tear out of me, and one that got me to the point where I was fighting it. So it's gonna be a tough one. We'll see if you make the list there.
All right. Well, I will certainly try. That's for sure.
I want to mention about Kickstarter for anybody who hasn't done Kickstarter before. One of the things I love about Kickstarter projects are the flexibility to budgets. It's a really flexible system. I'm always the one, first of all, my first goal is how do I get the book? Because I'm a comic fan. So for me, that's my end goal is to make sure I get the book. But I love that, no matter what your budget is, if you're just a fan who's I don't have any budget right now, but I really believe in this project, I'd love to support it and get it off the ground, you can start at $1 and work your whole way up all the way to, you have huge swag prizes when you get past 1,000 end of things. And everything in between, $5, $10, straight on through. And I would encourage anybody who hasn't gone to Kickstarter before to check this out and really read through all of your different options, because I love when I'm into a project, not only getting the book, but getting, I know there's a collector's card that goes along with it, and, at different levels it'll unlock, production blogs, and I get into that kind of stuff because, I'm not a creator. I'm a fan, and I love seeing the behind-the-scenes stuff and Genesis and, what it's like to work on the project. I feel it connects me with you as the creator that much more to see what went into the story development and what went into the whole process. And this is something that I think more and more the internet is opening up these opportunities to be able to have a deeper connection with the people behind the scenes in a way that as kids, I don't think we had, when they were just on the newsstand shelf. I think, we connected with the comics and the characters and the stories that were being told, but the creators a lot of times were people that you didn't get to put a face to and didn't get to know as a person. And I think that's something that today, it's one of the positives of social media. A lot of times we talk about all the negatives of it and things like that.
Right.
But I do think one of the positives of social media, one of the positives of Kickstarter and things like that, I love that when you do a Kickstarter project, you can let people know via Facebook, via Twitter, can follow each other. It seems like every time you turn around, there's some really cool thing that's coming up that's making us all more interconnected in this medium that used to be very isolated before. And I think this is a great example of a cool project where it's a community project, that it's turned into that type of thing. And that's one thing that I think is great about Kickstarter is that you can, no matter what your budget is, you can be a part of Molly Danger. It's very easy to get on board this. So I encourage anybody out here to please go to mollydanger.com, check out the Kickstarter campaign. You can click right from there to Kickstarter. That's actually how I got to it. And I've already been doing Kickstarter projects before then, but I love the website. And it's great that you have that direct link right to Kickstarter program. But you can also then connect with other people who've supported Molly Danger through that. Because, every day now I'm getting new people that are adding that they're following me and following my projects, and that's something I've got to start doing now. I haven't done that yet, started following other people, but it's cool to, that we can, through a community, okay, if I liked Molly Danger and this guy liked Molly Danger, well, maybe he's jumping onto something else that's we've obviously got an energy like in the same kind of projects. We can start supporting similar things because we're going to ultimately get the payoff because we're going to be getting material that caters to our tastes. And I think that's really kind of a cool thing about where Kickstarter's going.
I agree. I absolutely agree. This whole Kickstarter experience really has been interesting and exhausting at the same time.
I'm sure.
But I'm like you. I've backed a lot of projects on Kickstarter since I think I've backed like 22, 23 projects so far.
Wow.
On Kickstarter. And sometimes it's just, it's a couple of bucks. A lot of times I just donate money to stuff that I think is cool with, I don't ask for a reward for it. I just donate. And I think that's one of the great things about Kickstarter is that it's a leveler. It allows people who, for whatever reason, don't have another outlet to get their product or their comic or their movie or video game or whatever. They need to raise the capital to do it, and it's a sharing community. And I think it's very cool that it's such a big sharing community.
This has been my introduction really to this Kickstarter stuff, and it's kind of been a neat experience for me because anybody who's listened to the show knows that when it comes to this tech stuff and this social media stuff, I am a complete idiot, and I'm not comfortable with a lot of this stuff. And I found it very easy for me to get started to do my initial support, and then just started kind of opening up, saying, "Oh, look at that! Oh, that's kind of cool." And it's a very user friendly. I was able to handle it easily without issue. So that's for me, I think, is a good statement of just the layout and the structure. And I'm not feeling overwhelmed because there's a lot of stuff out there with the different social media stuff that I feel overwhelmed with. And when I start feeling overwhelmed, I just say, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to shut it off. And I'm comfortable with where this is going and what my part in it is.
You know, Jamal, you made mention about the fact that it can be exhausting, but then I also hear the excitement in you with this whole project. What are some of the challenges as a creator? You know, you've gone from being an exclusive contract to now having this, opportunity to branch out and do some really cool new. I mean, I want to talk before you go. I want to make sure to talk about Kiss because I have some really cool questions because I really enjoyed that. And
Okay.
and I also want to talk about the Ray that you did recently. I know you've got Smallville season 11 coming up. What are
Right.
some of the challenges, though, as a creator now? Now you're doing something creator-owned. You're doing your own project and doing it through Kickstarter, doing it through Action Lab. How is that different for you than working for one of the larger publishers?
A lot of it really is logistical, to be honest. I find myself juggling multiple projects at the same time. So just making sure that everybody gets their stuff when they're supposed to get it, or at least within a reasonable amount of time, sometimes means instead of being able to just concentrate on doing 22 pages of a comic book, I've got to do 5 pages of a comic book plus a cover and a pinup. Or I have to start, I have to write something, or I have to respond to somebody's email about another project. And a lot of it really is still getting used to that idea of being able or having the ability to juggle multiple projects at the same time. That's sort of really been the biggest challenge. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. I still find myself being incredibly busy. But really, I think a lot of it really is for me right now is that I am trying to make that transition to doing more creator-owned work, which is, and hopefully that'll be my focus for, the near future, or, at least the next year, hopefully to 3 years, it'll be just the majority of the work that I do being creator-owned. So that's sort of the big difference right now. It's, having the opportunity to do other things, to do stuff like Kiss, and to do some of the covers that I'm getting to do, and, being able to contribute artwork to other people's Kickstarter projects, that sort of thing. It's things that I had to put aside when I was working at DC. I turned down a lot of really cool outside projects because of it. And it's funny, even now, there's a lot of people who don't even didn't even realize up until, San Diego, that I was no longer exclusive to DC.
Yeah, they don't make those announcements. They make the announcements when somebody gets an exclusive, but they don't.
Right.
They really don't. I learned from you. That was how I found out because you made a statement about it, which was cool.
Right.
From a fan, it was kind of cool to know where you were going because I want to know from a fan standpoint. Certain creators hit a point for me where it's no longer the project they're working on; it's the creator that I'm following. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of a hybrid comic fan. There's characters that I will follow for the rest of my life because they're characters that are important to me. They get me excited, things like that about comics. But then there's that other half of me that follows creators to their projects and things like that. And it really is creators who kind of resonate with me, who I connect with through their work. It's funny, I connected to you through your work before I was podcasting, before we had the chance to actually have these kind of discussions with you. And it's funny how talking to you, I connect somewhat. You'll throw out references like Calvin and Hobbes and stuff like that, and then throw out the Warner Brothers and Pixar. And we're chatting about things that I'm like, this is so totally why I like this guy's work, because I visually what he's delivering in the comics, I'm emotionally connecting with because his storytelling, the ideas, things that are important to him are things that are important to me. And I love that there's that energy there because these are things I didn't know about you when I first got a Firestorm sketch from you. The way you tell stories and just your visuals and the emotion you bring out in your characters. And that's when creators, they stop being somebody who's working on this project who I just happen to read their name in the credits, and they become somebody who I'm like, I want to follow no matter what project they're doing. That's where, you'll get me to pick up a Kiss book, and I don't mean that in any way as a negative. I'm reading this really cool from IDW, 1929 out of time setting, period piece with Kiss that was really cool. And I want to talk about that a little bit because my exposure to Kiss as a kid, before even hearing their music, was bubblegum cards from Topps. That was my exposure to Kiss, their cool costumes and things like that. I was too young to really appreciate their music, and so that wasn't my connection, in that era. it was really the bubblegum cards. And then years later, as I got older, I got to, know more about their music and like kind of the mythos of the characters. But
right.
I got to be honest with you, it wasn't until this IDW story that I loved this whole concept of the avatars. My first question for you about that, though, is,
right,
as a creator for you, you draw superheroes, you draw these characters that are fictional, and then you're going to these characters that are clearly based on real people. I know it's set in 1929, but when you put the KISS band members in there, they are based on Gene Simmons, Peter Criss, Ace Frehley, Paul Stanley.
Right.
How do you approach when is that harder for you? Or is it business as usual? Because I know you do a lot of reference and character designs for them. How do you approach doing real people in your comics?
It's, and I'm actually finding these sort of the same challenges with doing Smallville. It's, you try to find a happy medium between the cartoony and the amount of photo reference that's required to actually kind of make these people look somewhat like what they really look like. I've found that the easiest way to sort of maintain the cartooniness of my work is to sort of find kind of like a middle ground. It's hard sometimes because especially if you're basically having the work looked over by the guy that you're drawing, you want to, I ended up really just sort of really reacquainting myself with a lot of the KISS lore, like not just getting photos of the guys, but watching concert footage, watching documentaries, I even watched Kiss versus the Phantom of the Park, which I would not recommend to anybody. Oh my God, that movie is so bad.
Jim, do you remember that as a kid on Superhost?
Oh my God, man. I remember it, and it's funny because in my household, Kiss wasn't really allowed. Mom and Dad did not like the band, did not like they were country music people, so we didn't have a lot of heavy metal and a lot of, especially the craziness that goes along with Kiss in the house. So when that was playing on regular TV, that was we had to kind of not sneak it because you really couldn't back then. We had one TV in the house, so it's kind of hard to sneak it if it's your main room, but there was a lot of, what's this? Oh, and yeah, I remember watching it, and I remember seeing it later as an adult going, wow, why did I really want to watch this as a kid?
I remember I actually got into the band when that song Crazy Crazy Nights came out. Like,
right.
I remember that was the era where, because I think when Kiss was at its peak of popular with songs like Beth and stuff like that, I don't know if I was too young or just my friendship group wasn't listening to any of that. So
right.
it wasn't something that I had a lot of exposure to. I remember when Crazy Crazy Nights came out, it seemed to be like a resurgence for the band. And that's when I started to like them. And that's when I got more interested in things like their concert videos and stuff like that. And a lot of that stuff, when I was reading the 2 issues that you did from IDW set in the 20s, it was funny how you've got in the 1920s, you set up this really cool like gangster world. I love the way that the story was crafted because before you see any of Kiss, before you see any of the demons or things like that, there was this really cool few pages of establishment of the 20s world. I was taken out of time. And I thought that was really important in the story development of it. And for anybody that hasn't done this, it's 2 issues. It was it actually is available still at your comic shops. It's also available on the Comixology app. It's $1.99 for each issue. So there's multiple ways to get this. The Kiss issues are published by IDW. They're really, really cool. They're very accessible. The 2 issues are very contained. You get a complete story in those 2 issues. It does continue. It looks like it's going to continue on to other eras, but this 2 issues that, and I think you're just on these 2 issues, right, Jamal?
Right, just those 2 issues, and I'm doing the alternate covers for issues 5 and 6.
Nice. It's a great story. For anybody who likes period pieces, I love stuff set out of time. And these issues set in the 1920s I thought were really, really great. And then what ends up happening is, and I don't want to spoil too much of the story, but I want to give people enough of a taste of it too. And we can talk a little bit about your work on it. It's set in 1929 Chicago. You get introduced to this gangster world, and partway through it, it turns out these guys have their normal day-to-day stuff that's affecting them, and we find out on a deeper level the world itself is in trouble, which forces this female like entity, this elder, to come forward and try to gather these avatars who end up being the Kiss band members' theme. I don't want to say it's the Kiss band members because it's really it's their characters that they've crafted on stage, that each one of them has a different power set. You know, you've got the demon, the celestial, each one of these characters, and I love that because of the fact that, you know, you take a demon and celestial and put them together, they're not going to have the same ideology and the same mindset, just like the people who are absorbing the avatars, who are really taking on that form. I love that there's like, it's not this band that instantly comes together. They have to learn over time how to appreciate each other's differences in order to solve the problem at hand. It's a great story. And it was something that I really was captivated by. I'm sitting here, I'm like, wow, I'm really digging this Kiss story. I'm honestly, I'm going to follow the story beyond the 2 issues, because the first 2 issues in, really, you crafted a world that made it super cool. I love when you do like time travel stuff. You can take a story like these avatars are now going to be in people in a different era. I get into that kind of stuff. While the story transported you to the 20s, it was also very tongue-in-cheek on Kiss's present-day influence. You know, the band getting together, rock and roll all night, and there were editor notes joking around about some of that stuff. Right. I thought that was really cool how the story was a serious, deep story, but while at the same time, it didn't take itself too seriously. It wasn't afraid to have a little fun. And no, absolutely. And I think it was, you know, a wink and a nod at the readers, and I thought that was really cool as well.
That is all Chris Ryall. Chris Ryall is a huge Kiss fan. He and Tom Waltz, who is the other series writer and the book's editor, these guys are huge Kiss fans. And Chris, like all the little in jokes and all the lines from different lyrics and everything that ties into Kiss to Kisstory, for lack of a better term, is all coming out of Chris. It was really like, for me, I was a Kiss fan, but I'm like you, Sean. Like, I didn't get into Kiss until after they took the makeup off, around the Crazy Crazy Nights and Lick It Up and all that stuff. And doing this project just sort of made me realize, oh my God, I know so much more about Kiss than I ever realized that I knew. Like, Kiss is one of those bands that they've been around for so long. There's probably a Kiss song that you love that you would not even realize was a Kiss song.
Could you imagine as a kid that I saw the picture of you with Gene Simmons. Right. As a kid, going back to, that era, that you would grow up, you would be drawing Gene Simmons in a comic and getting a picture with him and stuff. I mean, how cool is that? Only in comics, I think, would you go from, you've drawn Firestorm, Superman, Supergirl, Batgirl. Who haven't you drawn? DC and Marvel through, various different covers and crossovers and projects like that, and then Top Cow, and you've drawn a lot of characters. I was actually looking through a list of work that you've done, and it's really through either covers or miniseries or one-shots. You've covered a lot of ground in your career of characters that you've been involved with. And it coming to this level now where you're like, and you can add Kiss to that. I mean, how cool is that?
It's very cool. But at the same time, if you had told me 2 years ago or even a year ago that I would be drawing a Kiss comic book and I would be doing a signing at San Diego Comic-Con with Gene Simmons, I would have called you a liar. Yeah, it's weird how these things work out.
As pretty much a non-Kiss fan, because I wasn't really into the band, and I have to say I really dig this title. This was something that, because when I first heard about it from you in Chicago, I was like, Kiss? What's going on with that? And then you told me the concept. I was like, oh, that sounds like it's going to be fun. And, fun is a really good description of this. It's also a really cool story. Even if you take off that it's Kiss, if you just look at it as if it's 4 guys, who are the avatars fighting, evil. It's a really good story. It's a really solid story. And add to it, those some really cool art moments that I was really glad, because I dig your style. I dig the way you do the physical, action motion. You do the combat sequences, and even like some of your background stuff is always kind of I always like looking at what you're doing in your backgrounds. And so you were just a great add-on on this. And
Thanks.
this was, I was like, man, this is a good, solid story.
Thank you, man. But I'm glad, because I think it absolutely does work on that level. I mean, you don't have to be a Kiss fan to read this book. I mean, you can have never even heard of the characters, and then basically the way that the story is told, it's just like any other super team coming together. It just happens to be based on a band.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the Rolling Stones as well, and I think one of the reasons why your band's like, I mean, with the Rolling Stones, it was Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger was really good at getting in the public eye with merchandising, with getting the band, keeping the band's name, the logo, and all that out there. And I think that's something that Kiss has always managed to do. I'm a Howard Stern listener, and for years he had on this comedian called Craig Gass, who he did an impression of Gene Simmons, and Gene Simmons was actually on the show once when Craig Gass was there, and it was like,
right.
It was uncanny, hearing the two of them on at the same time. But one of the jokes, it was a joke that Craig Gass was doing, but he was doing it because, the best humor is when it comes from reality. He was joking about, all the Kiss merchandising that they do. And it's amazing how, I think this band has done a terrific job of keeping themselves relevant to multiple generations through merchandising. The comic book, I think, is a brilliant idea because, how many people picked up the comic book Kiss because they're IDW fans, they're
right.
fans of your work, they're fans of the writer, whatever brought them to the dance, and that might be their first exposure to Kiss and the mythos, and that might lead them to listen to a single. I mean, because nowadays that stuff is so accessible with iTunes and things like that. You just
right.
go on and click for 99 cents and you're listening to a song. It's funny how there's that kind of energy with bands. It's cool to see them reaching out, because that's something growing up. There was always comic books that were connected in some way with rock and roll or with music. You always would see those characters either. I remember Aerosmith making appearances in comics and stuff like that. You'd see different bands appearing in comics, either with superheroes or various other places. And I think
right.
it's cool to see that continuing, because I think there's a natural connection between the two cultures of music and comics.
Oh, I would agree. I think that the theatricality, especially of some of the more outlandish acts like Kiss or Queen, or I would even like Gwar is a good example,
yeah.
or even like with some of the current bands like Foxy Shazam, like that level of theatricality and spectacle translates very well to the comic book medium.
The Kiss comic, for anybody out there, this thing's got speakeasies, police informants. It's a cool era because it's an era where you wouldn't expect the supernatural to all of a sudden take over. And when it does, it doesn't have the kind of technology that you're used to seeing today, in supernatural stories. So anybody that's a fan of stories involving demon and monsters and supernatural happenings, there's a story here for you. So it's really, really cool. And if you're a fan of period pieces, there's a story here for you. This comic works on a lot of levels. So anybody who didn't check this out, I highly recommend it, because I loved the two issues. They were great reads. I read them multiple times, and I really, really enjoyed the world that was crafted for me.
And the next series looks like it's medieval times.
Oh, cool.
Because there's the one they showed the cover, and it's got them with some big axes and swords and whatnot. So it looks like they're going back even further in time to a different era. So they're going to be jumping around time, and I think that's kind of I'm actually in for the as I said, I initially got this because Jamal was going to be working. I'm like, oh, it should look pretty good, and I'm now into this. I'm now regularly picking this up, and we're going to see where this goes.
I first started reading books from IDW when Peter David's Fallen Angel went over there. I'm a big fan of Fallen Angel. I was when it was at DC, and I followed it on. It's actually a series that I think got even better as it went along. I think that was one where the transition over IDW just seemed to have their production values over there are insane. The card stock that they use and things like that. It's a cool production value that they do over at IDW. I've always liked their works. I'm a big fan of Doctor Who, and they've got the Doctor Who license over there.
Right.
So it's a really cool company. So if you haven't checked out an IDW book, this is a great way to get a start. Check out Kiss from IDW, because I really love when you their comics feel special the way that they're crafted. They really do a nice job with their production of them.
Oh, no, you don't!
I want to talk a little bit about the Ray, because it was a story that we talk about fun. Lucian was a character in that 4-issue series. The first issue out, I wanted this to be an ongoing. And I mean, and the reason why is it was a character who I connected with. I was a big fan of Spider-Man as a kid.
Right.
I loved the fact that Spider-Man felt like a guy you could hang with, a guy that you could be, a guy with real-world problems. Lucian feels like that today. He's not perfect, but yet the real balance with Lucian and what I really enjoyed so much about him from the get-go was never at any point in time are you angry with Lucian. You're sorry that things are happening to him. You're sorry that things are going down. But there's the right balance with this character of fun, excitement. Oh, man, what's happening with poor Lucian now? But then you feel motivated. Like when he gets in that costume and he's flying around, it looks fun.
Yeah.
I mean, he is really a fun character, and I love that. It's a great miniseries. For anybody out there that hasn't read it, this is published by DC. It's another one that's available at your local comic shops right now. I haven't heard anything about a trade collection for this yet, but it is available also on the Comixology app, and it's also $1.99 an issue. So if you haven't picked this one up, it's really easy to grab it right now. I love the character because I love that his powers, he's got, it's the Ray, it's the classic Ray concept. But one of the things you guys did a great job with was visually exploring how his flight was different than like other heroes. He has to like hit and bend light and like almost reflect, not almost, he has to reflect off of surfaces in order to get from place to place. I love that he instantly felt unique to me. There was something that set him drastically apart. He couldn't wear clothes because they burn off of him, so he had to find a way to use his powers to get in the costume. These were things that he was discovering along the way with us as the reader, and he was talking to us. He was breaking that wall down and having a conversation with us, and we were going on the journey with him. I was so captivated by that miniseries. It's going to go down as one of my favorite published in quite a while, just because I loved the visuals of the world. He was so fun. I hope that he comes up on Freedom Fighters or he gets his own series or something down the road, because characters like this are needed. I need that fun character that makes me smile, and he's that guy. Jamal got a phone call here, and then when he came back, he started talking about his friend and fellow creator, Sean Pryor, and that led into this really cool discussion about his work at Action Lab, and then back into a discussion about the Ray. So rather than stopping him, I just hit record, and we started going back into the episode again. So this is where we kick off, where he's talking about fellow creator Sean Pryor.
Just dealing with him and dealing with Dave Dwanch and Chad Ciccone and all the guys over at Action Lab has just been an absolute pleasure. Sean and I, we talk all the time, and whenever we do, we see eye to eye on so many different levels. It's just really good to have him as a creative partner, and just to be involved with what the Action Lab guys are doing right now.
As a kid growing up, I think I know it sounds like you had very similar experiences I did. I remember reading a lot of the Marvel bullpen columns, and I had this impression, I think you craft in your mind what you think it all looks like, and everybody's sitting in this room together and they're crafting comics and all that stuff. And I don't know if you had that same experience that I did, but that was because you don't see any of this. Like I said, that's nowadays with social media, we have a better a connection with you guys as creators, and we get to kind of see, you're living here and they're living there, and a lot of times you connect over the phone with your writers and things like that. Sometimes if you're lucky, you guys have met and were collaborated together in the same room, but that's very rare that actually happens the way that we grew up experiencing that. But I always I use Marvel as the example because I remember reading Dan's Soapbox, and he'd always talk about the Marvel bullpen, and I'm like, well, so in my head you start crafting, and Stan had that great way of, even in those Saturday morning cartoons, of taking you into whatever world he wanted to throw you into.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. It's like, I mean, especially being from New York, when I was in high school, freshman year of high school, the first thing that me and my buddies did was we went and tried to get and take the Marvel tour. So the first time that I took the Marvel tour, I'm walking through the offices and see the bullpen. And the actual bullpen, like back then, was just a very small space, and the only people who were there were the interns and the production guys, the in-house production guys, and I was crushed. I was devastated. I was like, but where's John Romita Jr.? This is like '86, so it was like, right. But where's Mike Mignola's office? Where's John Romita Jr.? I'm not going to meet it. Oh, I'm not going to meet anybody. Oh, that sucks. The only time, because I ended up doing my internship at DC instead of Marvel. I mean, I tried out for the Marvel internship, but things just worked out the way they did. DC, Marvel kind of dragged their feet, and DC basically made me an offer to be their intern like 20 minutes after I left the office. So
yeah, well, so I mean that's perfect. Why you'd be crazy.
But DC was where I wanted to be anyway, as far as like my internship went. So the one time that I did go back to Marvel, because my friend Drew was the Marvel intern, that was the first time that I ever met Brian Hitch, and this is when he was still drawing She-Hulk. It was weird. Like I think about it now, and like we're both old fat men now. Well established in our careers and everything. It's very cool to have had those experiences, but again, there's still that disappointment of there not being the physical bullpen. Or you remember like back then, especially like whenever there was like around Christmas time, they'd have like photos around the office and everybody was there.
Yes.
And, or they'd have like the big triptych piece of artwork that like Herb Trimpe drew of like the entire Marvel bullpen and whatever artists were hanging around at that point. It sets you up for a fall emotionally. It really does.
Now, this is the part of the story where Jamal's going to tell us when he went back there to visit his friend who was an intern. He showed him the secret lever that opens the doorway to the real bullpen that you're not supposed to see on the tour. I actually tell my students at school that we have a secret teacher's lounge, like they have in The Simpsons, where you can kind of like it's the area that they don't let the kids really see. Oh yeah, we have all kinds of cool stuff in our teacher's lounge. I told them one day I was playing Wii. Like, you're doing what? I was in the teacher's lounge playing Wii. Mr. Whalen, I walked through there with my mom. There wasn't a Wii in there. You didn't see the secret door. So I'm convinced right now that there is a secret door at Marvel where there's a lever leading to it that you can't see, or maybe, a Shakespeare bust or something that you open up and that's how you get in there, whatever. I know it's Batman, but I'll take my illusion however I can get it.
It's the portal to Avengers Mansion. That's basically what it is.
That's right.
It's the infinite corridor.
Yeah. and I'm fine if they have creators chained up in there, but they're there. Not that I want them chained up in there, but I'll take my illusion any way I can get at it.
No, creator chains are only emotional, not physical.
But I think that as a kid, that was always kind of because I don't think they didn't have the benefit of today's social medium. I do think that social media gets a lot of flack, and a lot of times for very valid reasons, because there's a lot of your hit and run bloggers that post negativity and all that stuff. But there's a lot of positives too in being able to have positive interaction, chatting with people with similar interests and things. And I do think on the comic book end, there is some great opportunity to have positive interactions with creators, to tell them how much you're enjoying their work. Mm-hmm. And specifically what you're enjoying about it. Because creators need that feedback. They want to know, like, hey, what emotionally resonated with you? Because, that's one of the things with you and your artwork, for me, has always been facial expressions, the way characters carry themselves. I'll even give a reference from The Ray. Just I'll throw out an example. There's that page where he first, lands after getting his powers. And he doesn't realize what the girls watching him have already realized. And he's thinking he's Joe Cool, and you see like his confidence is building because they're paying attention to him, and then the girls are like doing this kind of, you better take a look, and he has the oh god moment, and I love it because it wasn't just him. You see the other girl leaning on her friend, and they're kind of chuckling. The series of emotions that were taken through from confidence to shame and like joking and all that, that's something I've always enjoyed about your storytelling. That's one page that I'm referencing right now. But I mean, all the emotion that I just laid out there from one page of your artwork, and that was all art. That, that was stuff that you saw. The dialogue matched it, but I loved how, you took the script that you got and you took that story and crafted that emotion there. And that's something I've always loved about your art, because you see it in the characters' faces, the ways that they carry themselves, a lean this way, a lean that way, posture. These are things that you play around with as a creator, and it's something, those details take you extra time to put them together. I know, your work ethic when you, because it's apparent in your artwork from the A to B. And I've always enjoyed your storytelling, because it's that kind of stuff that makes me reread a comic, look through it again, look through the artwork, and really pay attention to what's going on there. It's because there's something emotionally that has connected me, involved me. And that story of the Ray, that page, I don't have it in front of me right now. I'm rattling that off the top of my head. I could open the book right now and look at it, but I don't need to do that because I've had such a deep emotional connection with it. I can just rattle that off because that was a page that really meant something to me, because it was fun, but yet there was so much to it. We've all been in that moment before where we thought something was going on and something else wasn't. Not because I had superpowers, unfortunately, but
the whole thing about working on this miniseries, it was fun. It was a fun job. I've worked with Jimmy Palmiotti before. He's aped me before, but I'd never worked with him as a writer. And one of the things about my relationship with Jimmy is Jimmy and I have known each other for probably I would say 19 years, something like that, 18, 19 years, somewhere in that area. And good friends with him and Amanda. And he and Justin Gray, gave me so much space to play, so much room to play with things visually. Like that page that you were just talking about, especially if you go back and you actually look at the panel where Lucian realizes that he's gone commando, there's a woman in the background taking a photo of Lucian's butt.
I open it up right now. This is great.
So, but I had the opportunity to put little things in there and to design things the way that I wanted them to be designed, and to give the book the look that I felt that it needed. And it was great to have the flexibility and the freedom to do that on this series, because I've worked with a lot of really talented writers. I've worked with a lot of big name writers over the years, and some people are more flexible than others. Some people are very specific about what they want. I try to cater what I do visually to what the writer wants in the script. So if they give me more room to play with and they say, go be yourself, that's always the best situation for me as an artist. But at the same time, I've also had opportunities to work with writers where they weren't as specific, but somehow I managed to match the image that they had in their head. And that's worked out well on its own. When it comes down to it, ultimately, I'm an artist. And I've worked very hard over the course of my career to be the best that I could possibly be. Not everybody's going to love your work. That's just a given. Everybody, you have billions of people on the planet. Everybody has different tastes. Everybody has a different sensibility of how, and a different aesthetic view of how things should look. None of that is clearer than in comics, because we are one of those few mediums where not only will people tell you exactly what they think of you and your work, but repeat it ad nauseum.
One of the areas where I've always connected with you is, and I've used the word storytelling a lot with you. I think over the years I've kind of misrepresented myself. I always said that I was, and I think it's because I'm not an artist. I always represented myself as like a fan of the writing because, I relate more to the writing. I don't think that's the case. Art to me, and one of the things I've really learned, because we went over the summer to the Getty Museum in California. I had just such an amazing time there. It was my first time there. For anybody who visits California, I highly recommend it. There's multiple exhibits going on, and whether you're an art fan or whether you can perceive yourself to be an art fan or not, it's very eye-opening when you go through multiple exhibits and you see what you connect to. And it's one of the things I learned there about myself is I am an art fan. And I do have art that I connect with emotionally. What I connect with your artwork is art is supposed to have some form of emotional resonance with you. It does tell a story, whether it's a comic book story that's, telling through multiple page panels, or a single piece that an artist has crafted to put in a museum, or, for somebody's home, or, for various reasons they would do that. The idea behind any of those pieces is to generate some form of emotional resonance. And that's been a consistent thing since day one I've seen your art. And it's something that's only increased over time. I love following the journey of a creator that I like, to see, as you grow, myself as a fan growing with you. So it's funny, and I do think it's been doing this show and the way we kind of, try to talk about comics from cover to cover in depth and stuff like that. I find that I reread my comics more like I did as a kid. I read my comics like I watched the movie Airplane or Top Secret, because anybody who's a fan of those movies knows that you watch if you like them, and if you don't like that kind of humor, that's fine. I grew up adoring those movies because every time you watch those movies, you notice something else, some other gag, some other joke, something going on in the background that you didn't see before. And what connected with me with that was the camera thing that you pointed out to me before. Right. I'm like, this is just like watching Airplane. I'm like, there's something else that, like, I've read through The Ray 4 times now. And not because I had to. I did it because it was fun. I didn't know if we were going to have a chance to talk about this at all because I wanted to make sure we focused on Molly Danger. And I really appreciate you sticking around with us to talk about this a little bit because I loved this series so much. I'm glad we're having an opportunity to talk about it. I want to tease this for people who might have missed it because that's the problem with a mini. Sometimes people will miss a mini. And I think for anybody listening to this, if you have not caught this mini, this is one of my favorite minis to come out in a long time because of when he's in the Meet the Parents sequence here, where you got his buddy Darius sitting there with mom and dad. And I love Darius because a lot of times there's like kind of the stereotypical buddy that's with the superhero guy who's he's got some kind of inherent flaw that makes him need the superhero guy. Darius really has it together. I mean, he is like a guy actually our hero can rely on. And
Darius is much more as a person. When you meet Darius is much more together than Lucius.
Absolutely. And I love that about him because he's that supportive guy. He's not afraid to joke around. Like you look at Darius and you're like, okay, Darius is the guy you want to be. Like Darius is the guy that probably should have gotten the powers. But I love that it's Lucian because I feel like Lucian's if I got the powers. But I love the family because, every family has their quirks. Mom and dad have their little things about them, but yet it didn't go too far to the point where I loved mom and dad. I didn't find that they were too slapstick and silly to the point where I wasn't able to relate to them. I related to them like I do my own parents, just in the sense that there's that thing I grunt and groan about with my mom, but this is a mom who really cares about him. And anything that she does with the best intention of trying to support him. I love that their whole like peace and yoga kind of lifestyle ends up being something that helps him to get his powers under control and his own martial arts background. I'm like, okay, this is a guy who's like pulling from everything in his life instead of, needing and I'm a fan of the superhero mentors and that type of stuff, so don't get me wrong when I'm saying this. I liked that this story felt different because it was kind of a different way for him to get control of his powers. It felt fresh. It felt a little different. And I'm looking for that when I'm seeing a miniseries and a new character introduced. What is the hook with this guy? And it's not one thing. His supporting cast is cool. His look is cool. I love the costume. I thought that was just a really cool costume design. I love the flight mechanics. I love that he's, flying in ways that look cool. He's using powers in ways that look cool. He's learning about him along the way and trying new tricks in ways to resolve situations, while in the meantime dealing with the fact that his life is falling apart because of these powers. Not that it was together that much to begin with, but it was certainly in a little bit of a better place than it was when he got the powers. And it was kind of a cool thing about him.
Well, I mean, here's the thing that people need to understand about Lucian Gates. Lucian Gates is a dude.
Yeah.
He's a dude. He's a 22-year-old lifeguard from San Diego. His parents are hippies, his best friend's rich, his girlfriend's hot, but he doesn't have, he doesn't really have any real responsibilities until he gets these powers. So suddenly he's thrust into this position of being superhero. And the way that the story was handled was sort of bucking all of the conventions that you would get from the typical first issue, because you come into it with him already fighting giant flying telepathic lightning shooting jellyfish.
Exactly. I'm looking at this is another page I want to make sure to talk about because I've been here before and I'll probably be here again because it's the start of my school year, so my wife's going to be doing this to me. The Shanti situation page. That first establishing shot of her standing there, I almost could hear her toe tapping. And I'm like, doing this podcast, I've been here many times. Because we tend to go on a little bit. And
no, really?
Yeah, I know. It's a big shock for you because you've been here before. But yeah, this show has gotten me into this kind of trouble before. And that was one of the things that I immediately love about your artwork, too. You look at situations, and it's clear you take from experiences you've had in your life, and you try to generate that kind of emotion. Say, what would this look like for me? What do I need? So I connected with that immediately. When I saw her there, I'm like, oh, no, you didn't. And it was one of those moments, and you root for him because he is the underdog in this story. And I love that our hero in this story is the underdog. He's a nice kid who is trying to do the right thing. He's trying to get it together. Even when he messes up or when life gets messed up around him, there's so much to really like about him. And that's the balance of this creation with Lucian. And it's one of the things I love the writing of Gray and Palmiotti. I think they're vastly underrated. You don't hear their names put out there in the same way you do other writers. And any of their work, I immediately enjoy. I think that they just really have a great grasp of storytelling. I loved this partnership between all of you in this story. I think it was a perfect miniseries for me because I just really enjoyed it from start to finish. There wasn't a wasted moment. Gray and Palmiotti, I'll take a little quick aside here and then I'll jump back into this. People who longtime listeners of the show know my insane love for Hawkman. That started with JSA, with the return of Hawkman, but it really bared fruit when Gray and Palmiotti took over the Hawkman series. And they were building the relationship between Kendra and Carter. And the work that they did there is really what, when I do my insane drooling over Hawkman, it was during that run that I started going back and getting runs of Hawkman that were prior to this revamp of Hawkman.
Right. And
reading all that stuff. So it's really this creative team that put that bug in me, which says a lot about them. They're the type of writers that I will follow. I follow their work outside of, because IDW's collected some of their work in trade that I had never read before, but I just went and grabbed it because it's Gray and Palmiotti. And I'll actually put links to that in the show notes, so I apologize for not having that off the top of my head, but I'm doing a impromptu side rant just because I really enjoy their writing. I think they're very talented writers, and I don't think they get the due that they deserve for the kind of product that they're putting out. A lot of their stuff, All-Star Western and all that, I don't think is falling as much under the radar as it was, but Jonah Hex did not get the credit for the kind of series that it is. And this book right here, I'm hoping this leads to another Freedom Fighters opportunity for them, because Freedom Fighters was a series that was vastly underrated, not enough people read. I think this mini-series is something, it's completely accessible for anybody listening to this. You don't need anything. This is a brand new character. You need no background to read this. It's 4 issues. Like I said, you can pick it up at your comic shop now, or it's $1.99 a piece at the Comixology app to grab the issues. You can grab $1.99, you can grab the first issue and see if it's your cup of tea. I cannot recommend this series, and I'm not saying this because Jamal's here, because I've said this on the show when the series was released. I cannot recommend this mini enough. It really hit me as just being a fun, exciting character. And another home run for you, sir.
Thanks.
Well, one thing you can't overlook, which I don't know if we want to spoil it, the new Uncle Sam, which I absolutely loved. I was like, is that, oh my God, that's the new Uncle Sam. Outstanding. I literally cheered out loud on that one, man. I loved, what you guys did with that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, I guess this will probably could be spoiled because he'll probably be featured in the Phantom Lady miniseries that's coming out that Jimmy and Justin are writing, along with Kat. I think Kat Staggs is doing the penciling on that, and Mark Deering is inking it. And that should be out. Actually, it should be out pretty soon. But the new Uncle Sam is a 7-foot-tall black man.
It's one of
a very intimidating presence.
I'm loving the way that they're taking some of their classic heroes. Like I love what they're doing right now with JSA over on Earth 2. I think that's they're doing a bang-up job with that. This I really love, that I'm hoping this bears fruit, this whole Freedom Fighters thing they're doing, because this is something that I'm really digging immensely. Even the villain, that Thaddeus Fillmore.
Oh, yeah.
I love that whole premise, because that's a great example of how you take a story where you've got this really nice, bright, likable character, and you can take a dark turn in the story without losing the character. Never at any point in time in this miniseries do you lose everything that's likable about Lucian. He goes through tough situations. The Spider-Man reference, I think, is really warranted here. I'm not saying he's a Spider-Man clone, so please don't, anybody listening, take it that way. What I'm saying, though, as a kid, one of the things I liked about Spider-Man is he was like, you saw him undergo these horrible things going on in his personal life and these crazy villains that he was fighting while he was learning to use his powers. You never lost the, kind of wisecracking fun of him. Lucian's not that guy. He's a dude. The way you said it, Jamal, is actually perfect. He's a dude. Right. But Lucian's the guy, after all this is over, you want to hang out with Lucian. Lucian's going to be fun. He's your buddy. He's going to be there for you. He's probably going to have to apologize to you at some point. But but he's also the guy that, when you're having that bad day, Lucian's going to listen to you. He's going to try to offer advice. He'll give you the shirt off of his back. It'll burn off of his back, but he's going to give you the shirt off of his back.
The thing about Lucian as a character, I think, is he means well.
Mm-hmm. But he's not the one, I think we all know people in our life that we say they mean well, and you're usually constantly apologizing for him. I don't think he's at that level. I think there's enough of Lucian that he has that really cool. That's one of the things I loved about it. I'm just the right amount of balance of crazy turmoil that you're shaking your head, yet you still feel he's competent. I think that's what I want to say here. He's really a competent hero, and you want to see him a part of a team. You want to see his further adventures. On the selfish part of me wants to see him in a solo. I know we're more than likely going to get him on a Freedom Fighters, which I'm 100% okay with, but I want to see him in a solo because of the supporting cast that was developed here that I want to see more of. The crazy villains that he fights, like this guy jumping out of the movie screen and being able to use his powers. When Thaddeus comes out of the movie screen, he does this ritual, and this is in the first issue, so for anybody out there, I'm not spoiling things too crazy, but this is towards the end of the first issue. They introduce his first major villain, and there's a sacrifice that allows him to jump out of film, and the powers that have come from that is that he can now script the world, basically. He has powers enough that he can kind of change like a movie, act like a director in the world. And he has the powers to do this, but he is so messed up as a villain that, like, he's the guy you want to put a stop to before he ultimately destroys the world. Right. And I love that Lucian never loses this sense of hope and wonder and all that through it. There's something uplifting about him as a character that, in spite of all the craziness, because we all have that. I think we're all, to a certain extent, Lucian, we all have craziness. Right before we were recording this, we were all talking about how, we've had some long days lately. And I think that's something everybody listening to this can relate to. We've all been there. We've had those days where things are long for a variety of reasons. Either it's a lot of work or things are going wrong or, whatever reason. We've all been there before. And Lucian's that guy that keeps pressing on and doesn't lose himself in the midst of all that. And that was something that I really enjoyed about this. And that's the type of character that I want to read about in an ongoing fashion, because I can relate to him. I can hang with him. And I love that in comics. It's rare that you get a new guy that comes along that quickly had that connection for me. He had that with me in the first issue.
I'm confused, Sean. Did you like the Ray or not?
I didn't. I didn't care for it much. It just didn't. I don't want to go too crazy into the Ray from there because I really do want to tease it for the purposes of telling people, go read it. Same thing with Kiss. I want them to go read these things now. I think we've talked a lot about them both. Is there anything else from either of you, though, that Jamal, actually, first of all, is there anything? I know you're probably at a stage with some of these projects where you can't. I don't know what you can and can't announce. Your hands might be tied on certain things you can announce. Is there anything else you're doing that you can announce? And if not, I want to make sure to reference everyone to jamaligle.com so they can follow, and your Facebook and things like that, to follow what's going on with you. But is there anything else you can announce?
No, not really.
I figured that too. It was one of those questions where I'm asking. I'm like, I'm going to ask this, and I know because I follow your stuff, and I'm like, well, I'm going to ask this question, but I kind of already know the answer because if he could announce it, it would be out. Right. He's doing this. So. I asked you a question. Basically, I knew you couldn't answer. Sorry about that.
That's okay. You had to ask, but I mean, there are things that will be announced. I just can't really talk about them right now. So,
for listeners out there, though, if Jamal's work has touched you in some way, or maybe we've got a lot of listeners who've been coming forward lately who are coming back into comics, for after a long time, or coming into comics for the first time. Jamal's work, obviously, you can hear from this just how deeply Jim and I connect with this work. There's a lot of great opportunities to get Jamal's work in trade, to check out the new material that's coming out from Jamal, to support projects like Molly Danger. What a great way to experience Jamal's work for the first time, to really jump on board things like Molly Danger, his own creative own work, which your introduction to it speaks for itself, Jamal. I highly recommend checking out Jamal's work. There's an emotional connection to be made there, and that's something, when an artist makes that connection with you, it's something special. That's what art's all about. He's the type of creator that has helped me, somebody who considered myself, I'm like, oh, I'm not an artist, I don't draw myself, I don't understand art. Through his art has taught me a lot about how to appreciate art. And I think that's really important when you connect with creators on those levels. So please check out Jamal Igle's work. Jamal, I know they can find you at jamaligle.com. Is there anywhere else that you want to point? I know mollydanger.com, and we'll have links to all this in the show notes. Anywhere else we want to point them to make sure to be following your work and news about what's coming up?
Well, you can find, I'm pretty much on, every bit of social media. You can follow me on Twitter at Jamal Igle on Twitter, or you can follow the Molly Danger Twitter feed, which is go_Molly Danger. Or you can go to Facebook, and you can find me on Facebook, although my Facebook friends page is full, but you can still like the Jamal Igle fan page, which you can find on Facebook. There's also the Molly Danger page, which is Facebook.com/Molly Danger.
I love Facebook, and so this isn't a negative on Facebook, but what a bizarre limitation. Like, because you're not the only one that's in that. I mean, there's a lot of comic creators who are running into that same situation where they've got a lot of friends who are obviously fans of theirs,
Right.
who want to follow, their Facebook and can't do that. It seems like a bizarre limitation. It's something that I would, if you figure at this point that they would have lifted or expanded. You can, in MMOs, you can expand levels. Why can't you expand in Facebook?
I don't know. Like, you could still you could subscribe to my friend's page,
Right,
on Facebook, but they don't. I don't think you could have direct interaction. It's very odd. It's a very odd thing, and it's something that Facebook probably should have lifted a long time ago.
Yeah, especially as it's grown, because I think Facebook's terrific. So this isn't a knock on Facebook at all. It's actually my only real gripe with Facebook. I don't love everything, but I think it's diverse enough that it's got something for everybody, so it's cool. But that limitation seems like just such a bizarre thing on a site that the goal is to, try to connect with as many people as you can on Facebook.
Right.
So I'm hoping they do lift that eventually, because I think it will only improve things for people such as yourself who, are connecting with your audience and fan base on there.
Or trying to, at the very least. If you contact me, I do try to get back to everybody eventually. It's very difficult sometimes, though.
Jamal, I want to thank you, as always, for coming on the show. You always give us a tremendous amount of time. I'm a huge fan of your work. I've been since Firestorm. I know I throw that out every time that I talk to you, but it's an important moment for me, because when that book hit me, that was my first exposure to you. It was your art style was new to me. You opened my avenues to something new, and when a creator does that, it's something special. And your work is always something, as a fan, that I appreciated long before I was podcasting. So it's great to have this opportunity to chat with you about your work and your continued success in comics, and I can't wait to see what's coming next for you. I will definitely keep in touch with you. We'd love to have you come back on again and then follow up with where everything's going.
Anytime, Sean. Jim,
Yeah.
I love you guys, and thank you once again for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure once again.
Yeah, you're a good friend, man. It's always a pleasure seeing you at the cons, hanging out, talking to you. It's always one of the high points of my con experiences. Just hang out and talk to you a little bit, because it's you're a good guy.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I'm getting choked up a little bit. I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
I'm not doing a group hug here, guys. I love you both dearly, but I'm not doing a group. I feel like we play that music about the very special Raging Bullets. Three grown men in their 40s. One boy named Lucian.
Oh, God.
A story gone horribly wrong.
Or right, depending on the circumstances.
That's true, too. This would be another one of those messes Lucian got in. I think on that note, we'll call that a wrap.
All right. Thank you, guys.
You won't get away from me this time, Buster.
I want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We love having you part of the show, so please consider calling in and giving us your thoughts. I also want to encourage everybody to check out Molly Danger. If you haven't gone to Kickstarter.com, it's a great project. It's a great opportunity for you to support this cool project. He's only in his last 10 days by the time this is being released. So if you haven't had a chance to, go over there, watch the videos, take a look at the material that's there. It speaks for itself. And there's wonderful levels to support it. So whatever your financial situation is, it's really a cool project to get involved with. This is the only way projects like this get released, is if we have an opportunity to help out as fans and to be a part of it. This is really, you're paying for the project and you get the project. One of the cool things about Kickstarter that I do want to remind everyone, if the project is not funded, you don't pay for it. So it's a cool, no risk-free. You only end up paying if the project gets funded, and then you end up getting the material that you get for. I've funded a number of Kickstarter projects. I've been incredibly satisfied. Every project that I've been involved in has been funded, and I've gotten the materials for it. So it's really a cool opportunity. They also show you right on the site when you would actually be billed. So it's a risk-free thing to get involved with. So check it out. Kickstarter is just a great way to get involved in innovative, new, cool projects. Once again, sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, remember, it's 50% off the Wave 3 books. Talon #1, Phantom Stranger #1, Sword and Sorcery #1, and Team 7 #1. Great new books coming out from DC. Great chance to get them at 50% off each. Thank you, DCBService.com, for providing those amazing discounts. Over at InStockTrades.com, 65% off select DC trades and hardcovers. Head on over to the site. It's only while the stock lasts. It's a great closeout deal that you can get from InStockTrades.com. If you see a bunch of things you like there, remember, it's $50 or more gives you free shipping. So it's kind of a cool way to save a little bonus off of the shipping as well. Next week, Jim and I are continue Before Watchmen. We're going to be doing a series of episodes on Before Watchmen, and we're going to be continuing that circuit. We're going to touch on a bunch of the books that we haven't discussed yet. For sure, we'll be talking about things like Night Owl. We'll talk about The Comedian, Ozymandias. So we'll see. We're going to go for there. If we have a chance, we'll get to Rorschach as well, but we'll see how time-wise it all works on this one. But the Before Watchmen series has been really cool, so we're going to be talking about a couple issues from each book. So we will see everyone next week.
Bye!
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan. And what you do to me. Are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see.